Welcome everyone to our Sacral Chakra and Sexuality webinar. Thank you for tuning into this. I'm going to first of all go through just a few housekeeping slides for you. Here at EAN, the Evolutionary Astrology Network, you can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free audio podcast every week found on our website. You can subscribe to our Astro Library and you can enroll in our multimedia course. Here's a slide on our Astro Library where we've put a dozen years worth of materials together in 3 different sections. You can enroll 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you can cancel at any time. And this is typically where a lot of our public webinars eventually end up on our website. Here's our multimedia course, which is divided up into 3 different segments. Segments 1 and 2, as you see on your screen, can be purchased online as digital materials only, or you can purchase any one of these 3 segments with materials. Segments 1 and 2, you can do it both ways. You can get the live DVDs and materials, and you can also have digital access to if you would like. We also offer certification in segments 1 and 2 as well. All right, so what we're going to be working with here tonight is the second chakra in our series on the 7 chakras, and you can see here right off the bat, we have a co-rulership of the sacral chakra by Jupiter and Neptune. We're going to explore this, but before we do, I'm going to have a few slides that are similar to the root chakra class. These are some basics on the chakras that I just felt that I needed to leave in the entire series in case somebody looks at these chakras as standalone classes of information. Here's a listing of some of the most popular chakra books, as you can see, starting back nearly a century ago by Western authors who have brought this whole concept of the chakras over here to the Western Hemisphere. Obviously, Anadia Judith is one of the most popular ones. She has 2 books here, and that's where I have received a lot of the information and materials, and I'm taking her work and combining it with what we know from Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings on evolutionary astrology and the chakras. First of all, there is a significance in the number 7 throughout history and many different philosophies. The 7 rainbow-hued veils of Maya, the 7 stoles of Isis and Egypt. In Christianity, we had the 7 veils of Siloam, and forgive my pronunciation of words. The 7 days of creation, 7 virtues, 7 deadly sins. The Theosophists have the 7 cosmic rays of creation, and of course in the Kabbalah tree of life, there's 7 levels of development. In numerology, the number 7 is spiritual questing, psychic abilities, wisdom, and the occult. And of course, look at how it has slipped into just our everyday world. We have 7 days of the week. We have 7 stars in the Big Dipper. We have 7 notes to the major scale in music, and we have 7 colors to the rainbow. So what we are going to be working with in this series is the 7 major chakras. There are minor chakras, but we won't go into any considerations of these. We'll just work our way through the 7 major chakras. Now, these originate from Eastern philosophies. They're known to be the consciousness or energy behind the manifestation of anything. There is a mind-body polarity. The chakras vitalize the physical body. And when a chakra is closed down, there can be a lack of vitality in the area of the physical body that chakra rules. Now, Again, there's many chakras. We're just looking at the seven major or main chakras. The Eastern philosophies were more concerned with the higher chakras or consciousness over the lower chakras and the material world. Interestingly enough, in our Western philosophies, it's flipped around just the opposite. Much of our westernized world is more concerned with the material, the lower chakras, over consciousness in the higher chakras. Perhaps between the two, there might be some balance going on here. Now, chakra is a Sanskrit word, means wheel, circle, or disc of life force energy in the subtle body. And as you can see here, I am using the numbering system that starts with the root or survival chakra and goes up the ladder, but you can also number it just the opposite. You can see all 7 chakras here. Again, today we're going to be concentrating on the sacral chakra and sexuality. The chakras also have a correspondence to the nervous system, as you can see listed here, and the endocrine system. In the nervous system, the sacral chakra is going to relate to all of the nerves around the sacral area. Now the sacrum, if you look at this photo right here, the sacrum is that major hip bone that we see that just kind of covers the whole hip area, allows all the sciatic nerve to run down the legs. That's ruled by the sacral chakra. And it covers anything that's in here between the root to the solar plexus chakra. We'll look at what all this includes in more details later on. In the endocrine system, the sacral chakra has rulership over the ovaries and the testicles. Now, I just want to point out here that even though all of this is coming from Anadia Judas' Wheel of Life book, one of the things that Jeffrey Green brought to the chakra knowledge is at the base of the coccyx, right down here, at the base of the spine. When you used to look in the old Gray's Anatomy books, there used to be a little bump at the base of the spine and it was never named. Jeffrey would teach that is actually the Kundalini gland. And when we practice to expand consciousness, we raise this Kundalini energy up the spine. There's an actual hormone, Kundalini hormone, that is secreted. Boy, I can't talk today. Out of this gland at the base of the spine. I'll have a couple, I think I got another slide here coming up where I can show you this a little bit better. Kundala is the Sanskrit word for coiled, and Kundalini was the Hindu goddess known as the sleeping serpent, and she was coiled around the root chakra 3.5 times. And Kundalini, when that energy is awakened, it travels up the Sushumna, and it awakens each chakra and transforms its energy. And again, the Sushumna is the vertical column of energy from the base of the spine all the way up to the crown. And along with that is also the Ida and Pingala, which are energy currents traveling in the figure eights around each chakra. And those energy currents, the Ida and Pingala, are actually what makes the chakra spin. Now, one of the things that I haven't done in this series is come out with which way each of the chakras are supposed to spin. For my personal awareness and studies, I don't know if there is a right or wrong way for each of the chakras to spin. It's just like when you look into the field of herbology, and one person will take valerian root and it puts them to sleep, And someone else who can have a very active Neptune in their chart or a very active sensitivity in their chart will have just the opposite reaction to valerian root. It wakes them up and gives them energy. So for me personally, the discernment is still out on which way the chakras actually spin. I guess I would say, if anything, it's when a chakra is shut down and stuck and not spinning at all that is of more importance and need of healing than going back and forth over which way each chakra is supposed to be spinning. There is thought that they as you go through the first 6 chakras from root up to medulla or Agna chakra, that they each spin the opposite. One spins one way, the second one spins the other way, the third one spins the first as the same as the first or root chakra. So stay tuned. Maybe as we move through this series, I'll have my own opinion on that. I've also heard different rulerships here. I've heard that the Ida is ruled by the moon and the Pingala is ruled by the sun. So far, this is the one that I am sticking with, and this is coming from Jeffrey Green's book on Uranus. Now, Oriental medicine has 14 major acupuncture meridians, of which we include the Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala. All right. Now, here's the visual on that. You see this column right here moving up straight. This is the Sushumna. And as we look at these two right here that are going back and forth and swing around and connect back in with each other, this is the Ida and Pingala. I'll have another picture of this for you in showing you Jeffrey's rulerships of it. But isn't it interesting that our symbol of medicine in the westernized world includes the same symbolisms with the Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala? Now, Eastern thought wants to run the chakras from, wants to correlate to liberation, Western to manifestation. But if there's anything we start to learn when we study the chakras, is that the energy runs in both directions. And wholeness is being able to balance all the chakras and run the energy in either direction as needed. So liberation is starting with root and liberating from the lower chakras going to the higher. Manifestation is bringing it from the crown chakra and moving the energy down into manifestation, ending with the root chakra. Now, again, here is what we've learned in our EA studies. The Kundalini gland is at the base of the spine, the coccyx behind that root chakra. And the intention of Kundalini energy is to penetrate, which is a Pluto word, to the nucleus of any cell in order to purge toxins, to heal, and to alchemically change the consciousness of any and all cells. When we start to rise the Kundalini, typical symptoms are either intense heat or cold, sometimes shaking spasms, sometimes transitory paralysis, and sometimes none of the above. Sometimes it's more subtle and we really don't even notice that energy as it's rising. We're all, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology and reincarnation, as we come through lifetime after lifetime expanding in consciousness, that whole process of coming here again and again and again and expanding from consensus to individuating to spirituating, that is also a natural Kundalini process of expanding consciousness on a soul level. So it doesn't always have to be major, noticeable when we are working with our Kundalini energy. Now, the purging can be actual physical contaminants, or it can also be cellular memories from other lifetimes. You go through a past life regression and you heal a trauma from that. You heal a trauma from a childhood experience. You are purging those memories. You are expanding consciousness. You are raising Kundalini. It can also, as we start to raise the Kundalini energy, it can create any manner of physical symptoms that are not always easily diagnosed by traditional medicine. It can also bring about spontaneous healings as well. And so there are various experiences on a psycho-emotional and psycho-anatomical state that arise with the Kundalini energy. What is most important is that we allow these experiences to happen and to be reflected upon. And sometimes these experiences will orientate from other lifetimes, and yet we re-experience them or recreate them in this life. That repetition of those inner and outer circumstances means that these issues have not been totally resolved. Who of us haven't gone through something and 5 years later it comes around again, 2 years later it comes around again? I thought I dealt with this. If it comes around again, there needs to be an acceptance that there's still another layer there to be healed. Now, what we'll work with in this class is the Kundalini myth that it is sexuality and sexual energy. And this is a false myth. Healing the sacral chakra is only a part of the Kundalini experience. And as that energy travels from the root chakra to the sacral and works to purge and heal in that area, there may be an increase or a decrease of sexual energy. More on this as we get into some particular slides on that. Now, one other thing that I would like to say is in health and wellness astrology, the chakras combined with the planets to understand areas of strength and weakness in the body. The planetary rulerships of the body are the foundations. For instance, we know that when we go Aries to Pisces through the circle of the zodiac, Aries starts with the head, Pisces ends with the feet. That's how Neptune rules the feet. Then we also have, just through observation correlation, all of the planets that rule the signs, that rule the houses, they all have their corresponding rulerships and co-rulerships. The chakras come in as a secondary system that will then support how you are working to discern, again, weakness and strength in any chart and or body. Some of the general rules in health and wellness astrology is that stressful aspects will tend to show weakness, and there's a lot more stressful aspects: conjunctions, semi-squares, squares, sesquisquadrates, oppositions. Non-stressful aspects tend to show strength, and those are known as the sextiles and trines. It's also well known in the health and wellness astrology that the inconjuncts, the waxing 150 degree mark, the waning 210 degree mark, will also show health crises. Finally, remember, there's always rules and exceptions to those rules. And with any of what we're looking at right here, it's necessary to observe and correlate. Observe and correlate. Now, here is the chakra rulerships from Jeffrey Wolf Green's book, Uranus. And I think this has been reprinted on a digital level. If you cannot get a copy of this book, I can certainly help you with a transcription of it. You can see here's the spine and the Sushumna that we talked about. I don't know. I will have to look this one up. I'm not remembering this one exactly, but one of these is Ida and one of these is Pingala, and they got two separate names here. But you can see here that from Jeffrey's perspective, North Node, Ida, rules the parasympathetic nervous system. South Node, Pingala, rules the sympathetic nervous system. And you can see here Jeffrey's rulership with the sacral as co-rulers Jupiter and Neptune. Oh, here is how he's showing it right here. I saw the words. So Jeffrey has this running around. I find things where as I've been doing my own studies again in this area, and that's why we teach. We learn what we want to teach. We learn what we need to teach. And so I find areas where I'm like Jeffrey and Anadia Judith, who I do consider to be one of the major authors on chakras, where they're right in sync. And then I find areas where they differ. And rather than just take an absolute, I'm kind of like, I think I need to study this a little more. I think I need to look for other authors and opinions on certain things. So I'll work on this one because this is well known to be Ida and Pingala, and Jeffrey's diagram here has it differently, as you can see. Stay tuned. We'll work on this one through the series. Now, when we look at the sacral or sexuality chakra, again, the two co-rulers, Jupiter and Neptune, and the sound that this chakra makes as the Kundalini rises through it is the sound of the flute or the cricket. And these are sounds that we can actually hear in our meditative practices as we are working to raise the Kundalini. All of the photos of the chakras are coming from Anadia Judith. She was kind enough to let Wikipedia use them with just crediting her as the source. Now, here is what the sacral chakra is called in Sanskrit. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Its color is orange. It is the second longest wavelength and the second slowest vibration on the visible spectrum. Svad is Sanskrit for sweeten. This chakra is typically known as the seat of life, the center of motion. That's one of the most key things I've got out of this chakra, is that this is motion, this is movement. We're beyond the survival of the root chakra. Now how are we going to go out into the world and be in the world in that process? And so this chakra includes, as we said earlier, the sciatic nerve, the reproductive organs, the urinary system. It includes circulation in general. It includes sexuality. It includes movement. Some of the key expressions of this chakra: emotions, sensations, pleasure, movement, nurturance, sexuality, desire, duality. Some of the distortions of this chakra is we'll go to the sexual extremes: profane or hedonistic sexuality without any meaning whatsoever, or the extreme of celibacy and the denial of sexuality. Other distortions of this chakra is when we go into isolation and we disconnect. We have no ability to interact with that world around us. We can go to the extremes of being catatonic or the extremes of unbalance when we can't handle that duality of spirit and matter. And that when we speak duality with this chakra, that's what we're trying to balance here. The sacral chakra is about being able to balance things versus go into the extremes. And so that balance is really all about duality, the duality of spirit and matter. And so sometimes, again, what you'll find distorting this chakra is we go into nothing but matter, materialism, achievement, getting ahead, or sexuality, or we just try to deny matter whatsoever and shoot up to the upper chakras. Now, one of the ways we can also distort this chakra, Leroy, do you know how to pronounce this word? Asceticism. Leroy will come on and pronounce it for us because I didn't look up how to pronounce this word. Meaning, when we have a severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence. Just look for a moment how a lot of our major westernized religions consider, any sexuality other than procreation to just be a sin, to be indulgence, to be, forgetting our spiritual purpose here on life. And so we can have with this chakra the distortion of just avoiding any and all things in the material world, and again, including sexuality. But what happens is that if we're going through the motions and we don't have emotion or desire with it, there's no energy, there's no vitality to it. And in general, we can look at this from the sexuality perspective. I hear you on.
I would call that asceticism. I think that would be the correct pronunciation.
That's what I was.
Asceticism. Yes.
Asceticism. Thank you, Mr. Third House Pluto.
You're welcome.
So if we look at this from this perspective of sexuality in general, the more any society or religious factions, the more sexual taboos they have, the more violence you tend to find in that society. Excuse me, everyone. I'm dealing with some sinus stuff, and I think I'm going to have to go back to my cough drop. I'll be right there. Apologies for sucking on a cough drop, but I need to do it in order to keep my voice going right now. So you can see that whenever we do have suppressed sexuality, we have a suppression of the life force, individually as a person, collectively as groups of people, as societies. Here was an interesting quote from William Reich. Sexuality is crucial for a healthy flow of bioelectric currents in the body. And an orgasm is a complete circuit of the bioelectrical current. Remember, all the chakras rule the nervous system and the endocrine system. And so this sacral chakra, when we are working to activate our natural entities as sexual beings, just helps, again, the entire nervous system, all the bioelectrical currents function and work in the body. You know that old cliche, use it or lose it? It's true here with sexuality as well. And probably don't need me to tell you all the distortions we have around it. So the sacral chakra is very much relating to emotional expression. And when we can freely express our emotions, it can lead to pleasure. It can lead to movement. It leads to change. Again, think of that Kundalini energy starting to rise up the spinal column, and then when it awakens the sacral chakra, we become alive. We want to move. We want to do things. We want to be. We want to have sex. We want to reproduce. So what we have to understand here is it's very natural to have our emotions awakened with this chakra. And desire is the natural expression of those emotions in action. When we suppress our emotions, it leads to pain, leads to tension, leads to crystallizations. It leads to going back down to that outer layer of the root chakra, which is ruled by Saturn, where we close everything down. It's not alive. There's no energy. There's no current. There's nothing happening. So the survival desire of the root chakra then leads to sexuality and survival of the species. Here's a couple of definitions from Anadia Judith on sexuality. It is the sacred ritual of union through the celebration of difference. Sex is a dance that balances, restores, renews, reproduces. It is production of the future. It is that natural part of our world. From EA's perspective, the sexual desire is the last desire to exhaust. It is the dual desire nature of the soul to separate from that which created it, to return to that which created it. And the natural exhaustion of the separating desires. The last one to be released is the sexual. And approximately only 2% of humans are naturally celibate. We have to go through the exhaustion of sexuality to release it. And what starts to get caught up in all of this is our human-made religions. And almost all religions have what they call that Garden of Eden myth. And its intention is to separate spirit and flesh. Spirit being the spiritual and mental bodies, and flesh being the emotional and physical bodies. So in this myth, Eve represents woman, and this is the temptation of the senses and flesh, i.e. sexuality. Adam, representative of man, is always about rising above the senses, denying the senses. Now, most of us on this call will know just how unnatural that is. But what we have coming through the last 2,000 years of the Piscean Age, and even beyond that, is that both genders, men and women, have been conditioned to deny the senses. And yet, natural law and our physical survival is utterly dependent upon all of these senses. Now, senses are the precursor to feelings, and feelings are the precursor to emotions. So senses are the building blocks to feelings and emotions. Now, senses include the 5 major senses: sight, hear, touch, smell, taste, and it includes the 6th sense, which is that intuitive physiological reaction, excuse my burp, to our environment. The 6th sense can come through clairvoyant, we see it; clairaudient, we hear it; clairsentient, we feel it or sense it. And when we have that 6th sense get activated, many times, we typically know it's the hair standing up on the back of your neck. It is your body breaking out in goosebumps all over. It is that, again, there gets to be this physiological reaction. And for another way that we will know it is that fight, flight, or freeze. We need those senses. We come through it as a species with our senses forever. And it's only just lately, in more modern history, that we've been denying the senses and this sixth sense. Feelings are an immediate reaction to stimuli in either our body and or our environment. And emotions then are a deeper response to the feelings in our body as we bring in the mind and information to process through it. Jeffrey Green's famous example was always in regards to the archetype of Libra Scorpio in relationships, and somebody coming along and saying something in a relationship that you didn't quite agree with, and there's that part of yourself that goes, well, okay, sure, all right, I understand. And then as you think on it and process on it, emotions start to come up and go, wait a minute, that isn't fair. I don't agree with that. I don't want to do that. This is not a value in relationships for me. Say somebody wants to have open sex, pluralistic sexuality in a committed relationship, and you can have that immediate reaction of going, hell no. But again, you get the point here. Feelings are more on the surface, immediate reactions, and then as we've had some time to process, there can be deeper emotions that come through, which is why sometimes many of us need some time to think on something before we give an answer. And down here, clairsentient, it definitely relates to the sacral chakra and to sense. Now, when we start to look at the sacral chakra and these rulerships by Jupiter and Neptune, what raising the Kundalini allows for is the expansion of consciousness with regard to sexuality. Sexuality is included with the sacral chakra, but it is not the only thing. But basically, what we are trying to do is shift from profane, hedonistic sexuality to sacred, tantric sexuality. And what can happen here is as Jupiter and Neptune get distorted, what we can have is suppression of sexuality over the higher mind. Jupiter is conscious beliefs, Neptune is our deepest levels of unconscious beliefs. And we can go for, I'm just going to be in my, here's the Garden of Eden myth, I'm just going to be in my higher mind. I'm going to be in my spiritual side over my needs with my body and my senses, including sexuality. We can also, as we've looked at, have all of this consensus religious conformity. The only time you can have sex is through procreation. And what's one of them we have now with the Catholic religion? No birth control. Watch for that one to start changing on a necessity. We'll see how long it takes. How many of you have a Catholic background or know Catholics who practice birth control? So you can see that what happens is religion and belief systems, Jupiter, Neptune, start to conform and suppress this natural sacral senses energy, the natural sexual instinct that will come through. The other thing that we can have, and it's a reaction to all this suppression, is the whole glamorization of sexuality. Just look how it has manifested here in the United States with our TV programs, our movies. What was that? 50 Shades of Grey movie that came out, and all of its S&Ms, sadomasochistic distortions. The whole thing of pornography, of dressing very provocatively and sexually. Just watch any awards program on TV and, who can outdo who in regards to just being so blatantly sexual and provocative. This is the Jupiter glamorization and expansion of all of that, reacting to the conformity and suppression. And it's the Neptunian fantasy with imagery and just going all over the place. All of it is still on what we would call the profane or hedonistic side of sexuality. And yet, the rulership of these two planets here is about expanding consciousness to recognize how reactive sexuality is making love to the divine. So, opening this sacral chakra is going to redefine our beliefs around sexuality and its natural energy as a species. Again, Jupiter is conscious beliefs in our search for natural law, natural sexuality. Neptune, again, those deepest unconscious beliefs in that search for inner divinity, sacred sexuality with the divinity of another. This is the whole purpose of opening up, one of the major purposes of opening up this chakra. And of course, it starts to bring into conversation this whole concept of Tantra, which is another Sanskrit word which means to stretch and expand. So Tantra is utilizing sexuality to again expand consciousness within our soul. It's distorted into glamorizing sexuality. It's distorted into suppressing an orgasm in order to quote unquote raise the Kundalini. And really what it is sexuality is a tool for expanding consciousness versus the purpose of sexuality itself. Again, expanding human consciousness is taking it from procreation, which is a vital part of this chakra, to sacred expansion of consciousness with another and with the divinity as well. Here's Wikipedia's definition of Tantra: an ancient Hindu tradition of beliefs, meditation, and ritual practices that seeks to channel the divine energy of the macroism or Godhead into the human microism. And Dunia says Tantra is stimulating inner divinity through the body temple. And I've included here one of her favorite books on Tantra, Sexual Secrets by Nick Douglas and Penny Slinger. And as I was looking at her, studying some of her materials, I ran across this, and I just wanted to include it because I thought it was kind of fascinating. This is coming from Sexual Secrets, and it's talking about the Tantric deities And there are 6 major ones. And when I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, that's the modality. Cardinal, fixed, and mutable. So there are the creators, Brahma and Saraswati. As you can see here, Brahma, the male god of primal creative energy, Saraswati, the female goddess of creativity. Together, parents of creation. Then we have the preservers, Vishnu, the male god of manifesting in many forms, and Lakshmi, don't ask me that one, the female goddess of prosperity. And together they rule the duration of life itself and its manifestation. And then we have the destroyers, Shiva, the male god of divine pure consciousness, and Kali, the female goddess of destruction and liberation. Together they rule Sushumna, that energy that runs up the spine, and is also, the lack of that energy is death and destruction. So that was just my own little fix on running across this and going, isn't that interesting how those relate to the modalities. Now, let's move into a little bit of Jupiter's rulerships, and then this will also have correlation with the sacral chakra. Jupiter, of course, correlates with its rulership of Sagittarius and the 9th house, or natural spiritual laws and principles, what EA has a tendency to call natural law. And so, again, this signifies that need to change our beliefs around sexuality and the senses. They are both a part of natural law and the expressions of natural law. And there also is the need to recognize that desires in general are part of natural law, that duality of manifestation, that polarity of separate and return, yin yang. So this is a natural part of the life experiences, to be here in the body, to be in the senses, to be in our sexuality. It also is representative of the evolution from procreation to sacred sexuality. It represents that expansion or rise of Kundalini consciousness up the spine versus suppression. Expansion, Jupiter term. Jupiter's growth. Suppression, Saturn, that outer ruler of the root chakra, and the suppression of energy and creation. So as we looked at in the root chakra, when we start to have the Kundalini energy become activated, the middle layer, Uranus, breaks up the crust, Saturn. And as it allows that energy, Kundalini, to rise, or the expansion of consciousness, Jupiter is here helping that come about, helping us assimilate the expansion of energy, the expansion of experiences, the movement of life, the just going out into the world and participating in it, to know pleasure, to be able to move. Now, here's a little more in the actual details of what Jupiter itself rules. Okay, remember, the planets are the foundations of the archetypes in health and wellness, and the chakras are secondary add-ons and applications to finesse, looking at areas of strength and weakness. And so, Jupiter is the archetype of growth, assimilation. It is the right brain, the intuitive part of ourself, the sixth sense. The lack of growth means that Saturn is dominating that outer root chakra and it's suppressing everything. Overgrowth is Jupiter dominating and going to those extremes with the sacral chakra and not having any balance. Healthy sacral chakra is balancing the duality of spirit and matter. Jupiter is co-ruler of the pituitary gland with Saturn. This is the master gland that rules growth and decay, Jupiter-Saturn. It regulates the endocrine system. Jupiter is co-ruler of the prostate and zinc and silica with Saturn. Again, sacral chakra, if I didn't say this, I know I said it before, it is the subtle life force between all of the genitalia, whether it be female or male. It is the energy force of the womb in the female, the ovary, the testicle, or the ovaries, yes, the ovaries and the uterus. The male, it's the prostate, it's the testicles. It is the urinary in both male and female as well. All of those have rulership and energizing forces from the sacral chakra. Jupiter is co-ruler of the thyroid with Saturn. The thyroid controls metabolism. It controls weight, excessive or not enough. It controls mood swings. And of course, Jupiter has rulership of the sciatic nerve, which is the primary nerve channel running down the legs, and it runs down through the sacrum, that big hip bone joint. It rules overall coordination. Jupiter rules the liver, co-rules it with the moon, rules the gallbladder, which secretes the bile into the liver to emulsify fats, etc. With Neptune in the sacral chakra, Neptune's sexual distortions will substitute imagery for reality. You know how Neptune rules fantasy and illusions in general. It will then bring this into the sexual area through the sacral chakra and move us into fantasies, sexual fantasies. All that role playing that we can sometimes do. And what happens is we start having sex or exchanging sexuality with images and fantasies and ideals rather than the actual person in front of us. Overexcitement with the Neptune's rulership of sacral chakra in males can create the premature ejaculation. Jupiter could be in here too. Again, too much excitement. Neptune will bring in general confusion around sexuality. All of the distortions of the human-made beliefs. And again, how religion has wanted to separate spirit and flesh, deny the senses and sexuality except for procreation, and look at how it creates such Neptunian confusion for us because we live, our body temple is a temple of senses. Sexuality is such a natural desire to express, and we can become so confused over that. Now, we can also, instead of overexcitement, we can have suppression, which is, again, Saturn ruling outer layer of root chakra and denying anything, denying those senses. We can have what we call the frigidity in women, the impotence in men as well. Neptune's basic rulerships in health and wellness include the overall function of the immune system, the lymphatic system, as well as the endocrine system. Neptune rules the thymus gland. And this is the gland that creates the coating of the immune system and lymphatic system cells that originate from the bone marrow and end up in our immune system. It rules the pineal gland, which is our biological clock. The pineal gland produces melatonin, which regulates consciousness and sleep. Melatonin functions to dissolve the Saturnian boundaries and allows us, it dissolves that illusion of separateness and allows us to realize we are all one. An overproduction of melatonin is the causative factor in all the psychoses, neurosis, multiple personality disorders, schizophrenia, disillusion, etc. Neptune, as we said earlier, Aries to Pisces, head to toe, rules the feet, rules the etheric or astral body, that subtle body that exists a few inches outside of our physical body. It will rule lethargy and depression when we are disillusioned, when the world isn't going the way we want. Neptune rules drugs, alcohol, addictions. It also rules dementia and Alzheimer when the mind disassociates from the body. It also rules the extremes of sensitivity. Anybody with a strong Neptune signature or a lot of stressful aspects to Neptune must be very sensitive, not only with drugs, but with food, even with herbs. Again, strong Neptunes can have that polar opposite reaction to herbs from what we normally know them to be like. That previous example with valerian root. Neptune rules that dream world. There are three basic types of dreams. There are our junk dreams, which is where we go to sleep and purge all the excess thoughts, all the information we're bombarded with during the day. It rules past life dreams, and when we have these, they tend to be very symbolic. They're going to be pointing out an area where we are ready to heal or do soul retrieval work. Something about our soul was ready to make that past life conscious, to become aware of it. And we have superconscious dreams, which is where we can dream information on a collective level, where we can be working for transcendence, where we can travel beyond the solar system. Just a nutshell in regards to the whole dream world. Now, I showed this slide last class with the root chakra. I want to bring it up again, and I expanded on it a little bit because there's this triune in the endocrine system that works here. And you can see here's the pineal gland, here's the hypothalamus gland, and here's the pituitary right in here. The hypothalamus is ruled by Uranus. It's known as the body's thermostat, and it regulates all the hormones. It emits all those chemical messages to the various endocrine glands to secrete the hormones to keep the body system in balance. The hypothalamus has an effect on the pituitary, which is that master gland, co-ruled by Saturn and Jupiter, growth, decay. The pituitary has an effect on the pineal gland, which is ruled by Neptune, and it secretes melatonin, which again works to expand consciousness. And the pineal has an effect on the hypothalamus. So it goes in this direction between these three glands in the endocrine system that all exist within the brain. So if we look at the sacral chakra, we can see that its ruler's Jupiter, pituitary, Neptune, pineal, still have a lot to do in dealing with all of our hormone processes related to the sacral chakra, an area of the body. And both of these, again, have their effect on the hypothalamus, which is going to regulate all the hormones with the ovaries and the testes, the estrogen, progesterone, the testosterone, and there's another one for the male that I'm not quite familiar with. The sexual function actually comes from the brain. The urge comes from the brain with these three glands. And then the secretions too, again, the ovaries and the testes that activate the senses, that activate us wanting to naturally have sexuality. Now, that's not to say that some of us, when we go to raise the Kundalini, might not transmute that energy beyond sexuality into the higher chakras or into manifestations of the material world with the lower chakras. That can happen. But it is a natural thing for us to activate sexuality as part of the sacral chakra. Now, that's the material that I have before I do have a chart that we will look at here as an example for a little bit. Before I move into chart example, though, I would just like to take a moment and see if anybody has questions or anything. And while we do that, I'm going to, is there anything I haven't discussed that I perhaps had forgotten in my note taking that you have questions about? And I'm going to get a drink of water.
You're welcome to submit your question on the Q&A panel, which is part of that your dashboard that each of you should have on your computer screen. You can also raise your hand and ask your question of Kim Murray if you're mic'd. That means with a USB headset or perhaps a set of earbuds so that we can hear that question. So 2 ways to interact.
If any questions come up, again, you're more than welcome to break through and ask them at any time. And in fact, I see the Q&A on the board. So just a moment. Laura. I'm gonna just put my headset down and blow my nose. Sorry for being a little under the weather. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back.
We do have a question about why Saturn was mentioned, as it is not in rulership with this sacral chakra. I think you were talking about it in terms of suppression, possible suppression. But
yes,
go ahead and answer that.
I spoke about it several times because the first chakra, root chakra, and second chakra, sacral chakra, are very, very close together. Some say they're only a couple inches apart going up the spine. So there's a lot of back and forth energy that will go on between those two chakras. And because approximately 7 out of 10 souls are in consensus, conform, consent, Saturnian reality, therefore, we don't have natural expression of the sacral chakra in our world. We don't naturally relate to our senses and sexuality because we have so much Saturnian suppression of that root chakra. And so there's almost a push-pull when that Kundalini starts to rise, the first thing it's got to do is just bust out and break free of all of those Saturnian suppressions. And then the middle layer of the root chakra, Uranus, it's that energy that's starting to raise the Kundalini. And when Kundalini rises, it's got to purge toxins first before we can really have that energy balancing and activating. And if you notice, there's so many co-rulerships of Jupiter, Saturn, especially right here, pituitary, Jupiter's growth, Saturn's decay. There's a back and forth energy that's always going on between Jupiter and Saturn naturally as planetary pair. So then you put those rulerships onto the chakra system. And again, are we going to activate that sacral chakra and acknowledge and naturally energize the senses and sexuality? It's just part of natural law and part of our species? Or are we going to have all of those conditioning factors, Saturn, that have us just continually trying to suppress it? Who of you haven't been fed consensus conforming distortions around sexuality? And when we go through all of that religious separation of spirit and flesh, and we try to suppress natural sexuality, it gets distorted. That's why we have the wars, the rapes, the murders, and all of the sexual distortions that take place, because we are not moving through it naturally. So, wandering a little bit here, but I think you get that point, that there's such an interplay between the root and sacral chakra that goes on, and a lot of it brings that Jupiter Saturn in as a planetary pair. And look at Jupiter conscious beliefs, Neptune unconscious beliefs. Look at how much of look at how conditioned our belief systems are to the fact that most of us run around with unconscious guilt, Neptune, due to the distortions of our human-made beliefs away from natural law and natural beliefs. So part of expanding consciousness, part of opening up to natural spiritual laws and principles with Jupiter and Neptune, is then activating that sacral chakra and opening yourself up to your senses, not denying them, opening up to sexuality as a natural part of your body temple, not suppressing it or denying it from Saturn and that root chakra. Hopefully that helps some. Any other question or anything?
No, you're good to go on the board, Kim.
All right. And I don't know if I perhaps have our chart example. I don't know if I forgot to connect and see if
She's on the call, honey.
Okay. All right. So let me go through and give a little bit of the background synopsis, and we'll start to get in with this, and we'll see if we can unmute her at some point and have her active in the class. So we have a female chart here. December 12th, 1970, 8 p.m., Hastings, New Zealand. All right. Rising is 2644 Gemini. We have a third house Pluto, 2935 Virgo in the third house. We have South Node at 25 Leo in the second house. North Node 25 Aquarius, or 26 almost, in the 8th house. And this person volunteered her chart because Jupiter is here in the 5th house, 23 Scorpio, square the nodes. It's a balsamic conjunction to Neptune at 1 degree Sag, which is also square the nodes. And the resolution node for both Neptune and Jupiter square the nodes is the south node right here. Now, as I was looking at the chart, I also saw Saturn up here at 1617 Taurus. There is that energy of the nodes perhaps moving into squares to Saturn. It's wide, but that could be something that we might bring into the picture as we are looking at this. Rulers of the south node, of course, are Sun by sign over here in Sag 6, Venus by house, also in the 5th in Scorpio. Ruler of the north node is Uranus by sign over here at 13 Libra in the 3rd house, and Pluto by house in, again, 29.5 Virgo. So the two rulers of the north node are right here in the same house. Now, background information in regards to this chart. This is someone who finds her, she's pondering that, you know, we're either third individuated or moving into first spirituated. We're going to be right in there. And we can work with both of these areas if we want to. Father was an atheist. She feels that he was on the Asperger's end of the autism spectrum. She has a younger sister, mother and younger sister, both undiagnosed narcissism, neither one of them capable of empathy and denial around all the family issues. On her father's side, both the paternal grandfather and great-grandfather committed suicide. Mother was in and out of mental institutions. This volunteer believes that her mother was sexually abused by her own father, who our volunteer feels was sadistic. In the last few years, this volunteer has really been breaking away from relationships with her parents, holding healthy boundaries. Background is growing up with parents on a farm. She's currently not working, but in the past she was a systems analyst and an accountant. She had a 10-year marriage to an emotionally abusive man very early on. Last 10 years relationship with someone very supportive. She has been I apologize for not being amnesia for almost the first half of her life. There have been triggers and flashbacks that suggest sadistic abuse, again, by that maternal grandfather. And there was rape multiple times by a teacher when she was 10 years of age. And so she feels that she's been borderline with the multiple personality disorder. Many sexual issues over the years, has spent a lot of time resolving and healing them through tantric massage, and she's been able to do that with this partner of the last 10 years. She also practices tapping, which is that EFT, emotional freedom technique, and Reiki. She discovered Reiki at the Saturn return, and it was just a major turning point for her in being able to leave the abusive marriage and find the courage to really start working on health and healing. Most of her life has been that whole denial of pleasure, working to achieve, succeed, and now really having a break from all of that. I don't know how long since she's broke away from it, but in other words, what we have a lot here is the abuse in the sacral chakra here. Again, you see 3 planets in Scorpio that are going on here. You see the Mars in Scorpio, 4th house. That can be some of the family of origin stuff. There's been a whole shutdown of the sacral chakra that's went on here, and just the complete amnesia and disassociation and just blocking out what happened as a child here with this fifth house. And then again, on the Saturn return, 28. So that meant Saturn would have been traveling either here in Aries or perhaps somewhere right around here. She was getting close to that Saturn return and making that breakthrough. Saturn moving into the 11th, possibly that leap, 11th house, into the healing modalities, and then finding the partner that has been able to help her with that. You know, they both feel, her and the current partner, that part of their soul contract has been for him to help her with her healing in general, with her sexual healing specifically. And she feels that this is someone who she can really trust enough to open up and heal with. One of the things that she said is that early sexual abuse affects your whole life, and many people never heal to the point where what was painful can become pleasurable. And she feels very blessed in that she has been able to go through a lot of this healing energy to whereby, you know, she can enjoy sexuality again. Socializing is still very hard for her to do. That interacting through the senses that we've talked about here, because she never knows when she's out in a social situation when something's going to trigger flashbacks. And when they do, it just makes things very chaotic and disruptive for her. She's also had a lifelong fear of pregnancy, childbirth, and anything to do with the familial situation, and, you know, not wanting anything to do with any type of uh, examination of the female parts, you know, those types of things, nothing to do with that. She had a lot of menstrual difficulties, ovulation pain, until she really started doing a lot of the tantric massage and healing of her body, and has been able to work through and heal much of that. Again, boundaries now with parents really doesn't have, I don't know if there's much interaction with them or not. So this is some of this background here. Now, every time you see Jupiter square the nodes, it's not going to mean that there's going to be trauma, or it doesn't mean there's always going to be sexual abuse. You've always got to observe and correlate. This is a bottom line in evolutionary astrology, and it becomes something even more dynamic when you start working with health and wellness astrology. You've got to observe and correlate. You've got to, here's where I see where there might be some sensitivities or possible imbalances. Is this correct for you? Do you feel comfortable speaking about this? So I would really like to offer my appreciation to this volunteer for being willing to show up and share her chart and her life history. Obviously, if we look at Jupiter here in Scorpio in the fifth house, it could lead us to ask these questions around the whole sexuality factor, Scorpio and ruler Pluto around sexuality. As we're looking and knowing the sacral chakra with Jupiter and Neptune, we could start to ask questions around it. The fact that she says, I can't remember most of my early life. Neptune square the nodes as well with this Jupiter signature. This would lead again to starting to ask questions around this subject and what is happening. Of course, we've got the nodes in the second, eighth, That also brings in some clues to this as well. And the Leo Aquarius, trauma as a child, sexual trauma as a child can go on with these signatures square to these planets right here. The disassociation, the mind-body disconnect that can go on with Neptune, and Neptune square the nodes can be here. We can see this signature reiterated. Again, when a planet is square the nodes, both nodes have been active in past lives. All right? So we could look at North Node Aquarius and go sexual trauma from the past. Okay? Both of those rulers are over here in the third house. This could start to bring in some of the memory issues as well. Some of the confusion. It's going to reiterate these rulers of the node. It's going to reiterate this Neptune square the nodes that this soul has brought through for us. Again, recovery work with the multiple personality disorder. I don't think it's been an extreme one, but it's borderline on that from what I have understood with this possible chart volunteer. So there needs to be working through some grounding. The resolution node, which is south node in second house, this is really about being able to ground in self-reliance, to ground in the body almost, to be able to heal the wounds around sexuality with these two nodes going on right here. Now, the Venus-Saturn opposition, and again, with the nodes moving towards, the nodes are, moving towards the squares to Saturn. If we look at the Saturn in Taurus in the 11th house retrograde, this will bring in the authoritarian parent. It'll bring in the father figures, the abuse from the maternal grandfather, opposition to Venus, the teacher, the authority figure, and the sexuality wounds. This is reiterated right here as well. So if we start looking at this sacral chakra here, and Jupiter is balsamic Neptune, there has to be a recovery process of her own power, Jupiter in Scorpio. There has to be a recovery process of her own beliefs so that she can learn how to establish what is right from wrong. The polarity point of this third house, Pluto, is up here in the 9th house, to recover her intuition, to recover her own knowledge of natural law, to recover her own intuition and senses around natural law. This is just going to be true with the 9th house polarity point, reiterating this Jupiter signature of what needs to happen here. Now, before I continue on, that was just what I am wanting to share in regards to some background information, environmental conditionings. Again, we have Chart Volunteer that is giving us this information relative to the sacral chakra and its rulers. At this point now, what I would like to do is see if by any chance Leroy can unmute our volunteer, if we can hear her, and if she has questions or comments.
Our chart volunteer will not choose to speak due to the sensitive nature of the issue. So she's agreed to kind of send any salient things over the Q&A board, but she will not be on live, okay?
And that is perfectly fine, honey. I understand that. And on behalf of myself and everybody watching this class, thank you again for being willing to share your story with us.
But she did just type in, I must add that she just typed in that not a lot of questions, but everything that you said is very accurate with an exclamation point. So thank you for that read.
Sure. Let me just check in and see if anybody attending the class live has a question or comment before I move on.
Sure. Again, two ways to interact. You can raise your hand on the board if you're mic'd, meaning a USB headset or earbuds, or you can just shoot me a question on the Q&A board or in the chat panel as well. So there are actually three ways to interact on these webinars that we're going to probably do a better job at advertising here as we get to this point in the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and if anything comes up, please feel free to be able to interact, okay, and ask questions or make comments. I don't mind at all. Or ask me to speak about something in the chart that I might not be cueing into for you, okay, in regards to all of this. So what I am also sensing from this chart is relative to the evolutionary state of consciousness, being able to move in. She said she's always had a lifelong quest and search for truth. So that ability to be moving into understanding natural law, as well as Jupiter being here in the fifth house, the South Node being here in Leo, the fact that this example has been able to recover and heal a lot of the trauma that has went on as a child. I suspect that she's got a stronger psyche. There's a life force there. There's a strength there through what has happened to her, because another person in the same situation could easily not recover, could easily not be able to stabilize their life. I don't know the charts. I've never looked it up, but I have two cousins on my mother's side that we found out their dad abused them when they were 2 and 3 years old, and they were so young it was suppressed. And both of these two young daughters acted out their whole life. The one died early on, extremely obese, so heavy she couldn't even get out of bed. We think she died of heart failure. The other one, when her mom, their mother divorced the father when they were young and moved back in with my grandmother. These two girls grew up, both married, both had kids, and as they were doing that, and say they were in their 30s, I want to say, the mother got back together with the father. She actually remarried him and moved in with him. And that act triggered the youngest girl to start having all the flashbacks of everything that happened. She's consensus state. She ended up in a lot of therapy, years of therapy. She, my aunt, when she found out, she immediately left him again, divorced him the second time, and that was it. Both of these parents are deceased. My aunt bankrupted herself trying to keep this daughter out of jail. She's still alive, this youngest daughter, but she has multiple issues, diseases. A third marriage, far as I know, it's still going good, but she just could never, ever get her life together. So my point is that not everyone can go through these extremes of abuse as a child and put themselves back together. This soul is making an effort to do so, and I think has been doing a great job at it. And I am looking at this Jupiter in the fifth house And I'm looking at the South Node in Leo, life force coming through. And that Sun, ruling 5th house in Leo, is in Sag here, discovering, searching. I want to know the truth. I want to know the natural law. It's got this opposition here to the moon, so there was the duality of the confusion, moon in 12th, the checking out that can go on. But there is an energy here that's relative to the evolutionary state of consciousness and relative to some of these planetary archetypes that this person is a survivor. Not only are they a survivor, they're making these metamorphic leaps of growth. Jupiter in Scorpio square these nodes. Neptune being at that 1 degree Sag, this also is an impetus of the search for truth and the search for my truth, and her eventually being able to hold her own healthy boundaries in regards to this. And again, to do the healing around the host sacral chakra, to be able to get to the point where she can participate as a sexual being, to open up to the senses, to open up to pleasure, to open up to being able to move around in life again. And it would be my hope that as she continues along this journey with her partner, that one of her clues or one of the feedbacks is when she can feel comfortable out in society again, when she can feel comfortable socially interacting again. That's going to be kind of like the barometer of really being able to take her healing as far as she can in this lifetime, to recover these skipped steps around herself as a natural being with senses and acting and participating in all of this. One of the questions I would have for this volunteer, and you're welcome to type it into the Q&A, and Leroy can share it for me because I don't look at that so that I don't get distracted. But knowing Jupiter's rulership of the liver and the gallbladder and Neptune's rulership of the immune system, lymphatic system. My question that I would have for you is, do you have any health issues around anything that you remember on these PowerPoint slides that I mentioned with these two planets? Okay, I'm answering my own question. While you type it onto the board, Jupiter in Scorpio, the menstrual difficulties, the ovulation pain, the sacral chakra rules all of the genitals, and Jupiter in Scorpio would be the clue to this right there. So you can see how you would be working with it from that chakra perspective. I would also say that you might want to consider herbs on a herbs that work with the hormones. The one that's popping in for me is Damiana, Damiana. Damiana is an herb. It's usually the leaves that are used. It's the herb off of a bush. It's native to Mexico, and Mexico makes liqueurs from Damiana. They are known as aphrodisiacs. That might be something that you could just taste. And again, being very careful here, being very sensitive with that herb. The other thing is working with the cell salts that rule Jupiter and Neptune. I have found in general, everybody in health and wellness astrology, that When planets are square the nodes, those are going to be sensitive areas where there may be some weaknesses on a health and wellness level. Leroy, I sensed you.
Well, just to confirm that sciatica is an ongoing issue, as well as herniated discs. So that is in that area, the sacral chakra, obviously.
That's the area right in here. And I also hear that Saturn right here. I mean, this is a lot of frozen energy with the root chakra that you've probably been working to wake up. And again, even though it's wide, the nodes are moving. They're applying towards a square with Saturn. So really healing your own authority and working to heal the lower extremities of the body, bleeding back into the root chakra. The cell salt for Jupiter is silica, okay? And the cell salt for Pisces is ferrum phosphate, if you want to know that. And any of you who are interested, you can just Google homeopathic cell salts, okay? The great book on this is The Zodiac and the Salts of Salvation by George Washington Carey. And it is, I don't know when it was first published in 1932. There's two authors, but if you just search George Washington Carey, and then it was republished in 1996, so you may be able to get a copy of that book. And there are 12 homeopathic cell salts, and they relate to all 12 signs of the zodiac. And Highlands makes the cell salts of life, and you can just Google it and you will find the charts on it off the internet for this, so that you can learn which of these cell salts to work with. So many times when people first start on the cell salts, they'll start taking what's known as bioplasma. And bioplasma is a formula with all 12 cell salts. And you just take that first, and you take that over a period of time, and then over a period of time, I would say in general 4 to 6 months. And then as time goes by, what areas do not naturally heal? And then you go into the specific cell salts. Now,
This volunteer, Kim, you might be interested to hear that she had a big response to homeopathic silica several years ago.
there you go. There you go. Again, Jupiter co-rules with Saturn, silica, and silica is so necessary for the bones and the tissues, and in males, it's necessary for the health of the prostate. Those are ruled by the sacral chakra. So in general, what I have also found is that I will look to the Pluto sign and house and those cell salts. And when I see planets square the nodes, I'll look to those cell salts, which would be the cell salts again. Silica and ferrum phosphate are the two for Jupiter and Neptune. More details on this stuff in the Segment 3 materials. If you are a student of Segment 3 in our course, I send you the information from 2 different sources on all of the all 12 homeopathic cell salts. But again, you can find that off the internet as well. Okay. And I just swear by them. I just really, really think that they are so foundational to healing in regards to overall healing. If it seems too overwhelming to start getting into all the planets and, rulerships of what to look for and what areas of weakness may be manifesting. But finding with these 2 planets square the nodes, and this is the resolution node, really going back and recovering your senses. You know, the second house is Taurus, ruled by Venus, and this is one of the houses that has rulerships of all five physical senses on the Aries to Pisces, 1st to 12th planetary rulerships. And then this gets reiterated by Jupiter co-ruling the sacral chakra and senses and sensuality and sexuality. Sex is a recovery process for this volunteer. And that is easier said than done. And I appreciate, again, sharing the story that you've been able to find a partner in whom you have enough trust to go on this journey of that recovery process. Chances are it will be something that you do throughout the rest of this life. Neptune, square the nodes in that rulership. I would say that you would have to watch sensitivities to all kinds of substances. Doesn't matter whether they're natural or allopathic. It doesn't matter whether it's food or herbs. Anything that you're going to be ingesting into your system has to have start out with minute amounts and or what's the self-testing that we do, the pendulum testing. One of the things that I find that I really like, I never have been able to accomplish use of a pendulum. I have a beautiful one. I try, but I just get frustrated. Maybe I haven't taken the patience with it. But when it comes to substances, the simple test that I like the most is to put the item in your hand, or say for instance herbs. I love herbs. To put the dosage of herbs in your hand and then put it right at the solar plexus chakra. And if the body leans backwards, it doesn't want it. If the body leans forward, it wants it. And that can be a most natural way to get past the head and get to the senses on whether a substance is yes or no for me, and then what dosage of a substance is yes or no for me. And that's been a natural way that I've utilized because I have a very sensitive Neptune in my chart. Leroy, something else?
Well, you covered earlier about different reactions to different herbs, and she wanted the listeners to know that she actually reacts to St. John's wort, which is a kind of a chill pill herb that I'm aware of, which calms most with extreme mania, but she did not react that way, is what her message inferred. So
yeah, so there's that polarity opposite reaction that can go on, and there's usually when there's that polarity reaction to what something's known to do, it's Neptune's almost always going to be involved, because Neptune is the immune system. It is sensitivity in general through, melatonin. And so you are just really careful with that one. Neptune rules the immune system, and so when Neptune gets out of order, many times there can be autoimmune diseases. And the last thing you want to give someone with an autoimmune disease is any herb that stimulates the immune system. Most common ones are echinacea, golden seal. Golden seal has a tendency to be more or less for bacterial. Echinacea more or less a tendency for viral, although they both work both directions. But you have to be very observing and careful with those types of herbs. And there was
one other question I got from the board, if you want to,
Sure.
as we
Sure.
get to closing here. I'll kind of combine an observation I had with this question from one of our listeners. Chiron, how would you establish Chiron as a chakra ruler, if at all? And obviously in this chart being in the ninth house, is that not in conjunct to that Neptune in Sag? And how would you then infer that or read that,
Oh,
Kim?
no, thank you. Nice one. So far, I really haven't come across anything on Chiron with health and wellness other than Barbara Hand Clow's work. You know, she wrote the Chiron book, and she feels that Chiron rules Virgo and the sixth house. And Chiro means hands. Okay, so it can have rulership of the hands. It rules chiropractic work. It rules Reiki and massage. Chiron rules all of that kind of stuff. It rules the healing arts. Okay, in those areas, and through Virgo 6, there could be some nervous system issues that start to come in there as well. Nice point. Excuse my burp. Recognizing this waxing in conjunct between Chiron and Neptune going on here, to me, it's going to be a reiteration of wounding Chiron around sexuality, Mars, Aries. Okay, it can also, and I think our volunteer was pointing this out as well in her own notes. Aries sexual Chiron wound, ninth house natural law sexuality, and her work, her efforts, waxing in conjunct to make the effort to heal in those areas. The fact that Chiron is in a double fire sign in this in conjunct to Neptune, also in a double fire sign, what we have to be careful of here is burnout, okay, and of things sparking too fast, of things just going haywire, hot wire. This could, even if we want to look at its rulership with the sixth house in Virgo and look at its Sag and this entire sixth house, there could be fried nerves that might come in here. And it could
Did we
have,
read that correctly, Kim, or is that a trine or is that the inconjunct?
oh, I'm looking at it the wrong way. Yes, I heard in
We're
conjunct.
Aries. We're
It's
Aries
a
Sag. I
trine.
have to thank
It's a,
another listener for that.
thank
Yeah.
you, listeners, for pointing it out. I'm not the sharpest tack tonight with my sinuses.
That was
You're
my
right.
fault. I kind of led you right into that one, but
You
thank you
did.
for
You did. That's a trine. But hey, okay, now it's the trine, so it eases it up, okay? But we still have those double fire signatures. So the question would go back to the chart and the client and say, do you have do you have burned out nerves in general, or do you feel that do you have burned out adrenals? Adrenals is ruled by Mars Venus, which Chiron is there in Aries, and the fact that the sacral chakra rulers rule all of the genitalia and the hormones therein. Do you have fried adrenals? Have you been working to replenish the adrenal system? Again, in health and wellness, I really tend to get into the ask the questions mode and get the feedback. Um, I get
our
very,
volunteer, by the way, just kind of entered into the Q&A board that she had
Mhm.
chronic fatigue syndrome for 20 years and barely functioned. And after discovering the Reiki and many other things, kind of jump-started that nervous system and came back to life. And that's what we could be seeing here with this trine, Chiron
Yes,
Aries
with the
retrograde.
trine. Yep.
Mhm.
And not only that, but this could be, regenerating of the nervous or the immune system. Not only the fried out adrenals, but regenerating the nervous system could go on here as well. This would bring, the trine was going to bring the ease of healing in this area. Okay, but Neptune still square the nodes. That's where we could have the, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on what you just said, that she, the chronic fatigue syndrome, just the overall attack on the immune system until she got into Reiki, ruled by Chiron. All of the, again, hand healing arts are ruled by Chiron. So, and the trine would be the ability to bring about these healings. Anybody else, questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to acknowledge you for struggling through it. We've been having our own issues here health-wise with a little bit of a cold. So
Yes, I don't get sick often, and I'm not real sick, but I do have some sinus stuff going on, and then it takes my brain and I'm not always the sharpest tack, but I think I've done astrology often enough that sometimes I amaze myself to go in and be able to pull it out into words. Maybe the synapses had just been there long enough working. Anything else? Any questions from our volunteer that she cares to ask across the Q&A board?
no, she just wanted to be, very grateful for the information and thanking everybody for participating in that way.
No. It is our pleasure, honey. I really appreciate you for being willing to volunteer for us. And again, I wish you all the best on your healing journey. Moving on here, due to my not being on top of it, I didn't set, I haven't looked at my schedule for 2016 yet. I will be doing that over the next couple of weeks as I prep for December. It will be, or the 2016 forecast as I prep for this class. I'll get into setting up my calendar for the whole next year. So if I have anybody who is on these calls and listening that have harsh aspects to Pluto or Mars, they are the co-rulers of the solar plexus chakra. That will be the next one we look at in our series in January. You're a little noisy, honey. By all means, feel free to email me and volunteer your chart if you'd like to have us look at it in the solar plexus chakra. So my 2016 forecast is going to be December 30th. I think that's a Wednesday. And then the following week, January 4th, Monday, we'll have our free Mercury retrograde webinar in Aquarius, Capricorn.
You can get your enrollment for that 2016 forecast right on the forecasting page on the website, or be looking for one of those event newsletters landing in your inbox soon.
All right. Again, thank you to our volunteer. All the best to you, and thank you to everyone else as we are moving through this chakra series. And a blessed winter solstice to you all. Thank you. Good night.